Hi, you're listening to a student-focused episode of the Sociology Show podcast. If you're studying the subject at GCSE, A-level, foundation, degree, or any other discipline, then this podcast could be of help to you. If you have a question for the show, then you can email the Sociology Show podcast at gmail.com, and one of the teachers, lecturers, examiners, or experts will answer your question for you. You can sponsor the show on the GoFundMe page and subscribe on all the usual podcast platforms. If you're going to class, going to the gym, or just chilling, put your headphones in and let's be sociology geeks together, eh? Hello and welcome to a student-focused episode of the Sociology Show where the topic is studying sociology for the first time. So if you're about to start sociology or you've just started a course, at whatever level that may be, this could be a podcast that will help you answer some of the questions. And so I'm delighted to welcome Ben Hewitson from the All Sociology Take One podcast. Hi, Ben. How are you?
Hello. Hey, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Thanks for joining us. You teach sociology at GCSE and A-level. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah.
Brilliant. Excellent. And so what I thought I'd do today is I'm going to fire some questions at Ben, some typical questions that new sociology students have, and also I'll chip in with some of the answers on that as well. Let's start with the obvious one. What is sociology?
Oh, man, don't hit me with that one straight away. I suppose in all of this, I will try and explain things and answer your questions in as simple language as possible. So in that spirit, I would argue that sociology is the study of society and human behaviour, and it looks really at how humans behave in groups. And when we talk about groups, we might mean in terms of someone's social background, we might mean if they're a man or a woman or something else, we might mean about age or anything like that. But also with sociology, and I think one of the key things that differs from psychology is we're looking fundamentally at the impact of the world around us and social structures and how they impact an individual. So it's a lot more than what's just going on in someone's head. It's also about what's going on around in the world around that person.
Great, thank you. And I think it's fair enough, isn't it, that if you are starting sociology for the first time, you're not completely sure what it is. That's quite common for a lot of sociology students, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I remember I studied sociology at university, and I had some people in my undergrad course who didn't really know what sociology was when they got into it. Sounds ridiculous, but I think that often it's a new subject for people, and sometimes, I think especially as is true at GCSEs, people take the subject because they want to try something different, and all the power to them, really. And I never call anyone out, I never bait anyone out for not knowing what it is, but I think it's important that in those initial lessons, not even before you've actually started it, but in those first couple of weeks, first lessons, first lectures, you get a bit of a basis of an understanding of what the subject is. But there's absolutely no need to be ashamed about not knowing what it is. You haven't done it yet. Yes,
absolutely. And I often get parents as well saying that their son or daughter's taken it, and they always ask me, what is sociology? So what else do you tell them, Ben? Is there anything else that's quite useful for parents to know as well?
Yeah, I think so. Thinking back to when at my school, when we do what we call options evenings, when we have students coming into their GCSE years or coming into their A-levels, we set a little stall out, and the common question that I get asked from parents, and it's often the case that a student wants to do psychology and or sociology, and they want to know the difference between them. And I often just talk about the way, and I'm not a psychologist, so apologies, but I often talk about the way that psychology is generally focused on the individual, and often the scientific processes and neurological processes going on inside your brain. Sociology is so much more about what that person does outside of themselves, if that makes sense. And so we look more about backgrounds and locale that people live in. We look at the kind of jobs people do, how they've been brought up, the kinds of families they've been in, as well as kind of what social groups they belong to. So, your social class, your ethnicity, gender, sexuality, whether you've got a religion, whether you have a disability, any of those kind of things. And I imagine that psychology look at those things as well, but as sociologists, we fundamentally are studying the interplay between individuals and social structures, where, again, I apologise, but I imagine that psychology focuses a lot more just on the individual.
Yeah, now, I think crime's quite a good example. I often say that if you were studying a criminal, the psychologist would look at the brain, what's going on with that individual. Is that person schizophrenic? Do they have a mental illness? Sociology, it's the wider issues, isn't it? What was their family life like? What was their education? Do they have a religion? It's those wider factors that's of importance.
Absolutely. I think the other thing to say as well, and I've got to be a little bit careful with this because it's a hot debate in sociology, whether sociology is a science or whether it's an art, but I would always having never done psychology, so this is me coming out with a complete load of rubbish, but I would always argue that psychology comes across as a bit more scientific, and it seems to be a little bit more dovetail nicely with students who have got that kind of talent at science, whereas sociology is a little bit more artistic. I am terrible at science, but I think if you've got that intrigue, if you're curious, if people fascinate you, then either one of those subjects is going to be right up your street, and certainly be something completely fresh for a lot of people coming into it at GCSE or A level.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make, that sociology is a bit more discursive, essay-based. Psychology might be a little bit more scientific. But that in itself, maybe we'll introduce listeners to their first sociologist. Auguste Comte, who's the first person to define sociology, did actually consider it a science, didn't he? And actually the word sociology, if you break it down into two parts, socio for society, and then the ology does mean the scientific study. So sociology does actually mean the scientific study of society, even though it might not be as scientific as psychology or physics, chemistry, biology, and so on.
But this is one of the wonderful things, isn't it, about sociology, is that there's never really going to be an answer to this. My opinion is completely null and void compared to someone else's opinion. It's all about the ability to argue something and using evidence, often from what previous people have said, previous sociologists or theorists have said, to justify your point. And that's why I love sociology. It's like cutting a cake up, but you can cut that cake up in any single way you want. You can do it into halves, into quarters, or you can cut little squares out and make your own little patchwork. It's completely... That's why I like it. It is a little bit, as Matthew says, like discursive. You've got that artistic element to it where you can argue your case, and often it's about using previous theory and evidence to back that up. And that's why I think, for me, at least, where the science of it comes into. So me and Comte do disagree, but I'm not gonna have that argument with him now.
Yeah, and I think that's important, that your debating skills got to be good. I'm sure your teacher will be encouraging you to join in the discussions and debates. So issues like sexism, racism, homophobia, and so on. And I'm sure you would agree, Ben, but I would say to students, get involved in discussions as soon as possible. Don't be shy, don't be quiet, because the more involved you are in the lesson, the more a part of it you will feel.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such a cliche to say, and I really feel like a teacher when I say this, but you get out of something what you put into it. And often I find that when we're having in sociology, it's about understanding things, and you don't always need to write stuff down to understand it. Now, if you're having a debate or a discussion in class and you're not actively engaged in it, you might as well not be there. Yeah, you might be listening to it, but the beautiful thing is that everyone's going to have an opinion. Everyone's going to want to say something, so get involved in it. And my thing on it always is like, when we first start it, I just say, just give me your opinion. And then can you justify that opinion? Why do you think the way you think? And then as we move on, we then start saying, okay, can you justify your interpretation of something by using someone else's theory or evidence to back it up? And that's the way we kind of move along. But initially, your own opinion and your subjective beliefs and your own experiences can all play into it. And I think that's why sociology is so applicable, just such a wonderful subject to study, because everyone should have something to say about it. Everyone's got an opinion, but it is a little bit more than just opinions, I have to say.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're about to start, be brave. As soon as those discussions start, get involved straight away. Okay, Ben, the second question that I'm sure you hear a lot from parents or students as well is, what can you actually do with a sociology qualification? What do the majority of people that, let's say, graduate with a sociology degree, what do they go on to do afterwards?
I think it's one of those subjects, Matthew, that it's got, and again, it sounds like a cliche and a cop-out, but it's true because I've done it, I've gone through this, so I can talk about this fairly confidently. It's got an awful lot of transferable skills it's going to give students, and that ultimately is those things are employable. So what I'm talking about are things like the ability to critically analyse things, the ability to interpret things, the ability to write, communicate, all of those kind of skills sociology will give you. But going back to the fundamentals of that question, generally we tend to see people who follow that sociological or social sciences line go into public services, or at least services where they are helping people, because it's a subject that's ultimately about people and about understanding and about empathy. So common kind of jobs would be anything in public sector. So whether that's healthcare, social care, social work, being a teacher or an educator, working in the law or police or anything like that. But I think the other thing we need to remember, and this is my own personal route into this, is taking a business background, because there are an awful lot of businesses out there who want to be able to better understand their customers. And if you've got a sociology qualification, or even better, if you've got a sociology degree, you have an immediate advantage over understanding other people because you've got a background in it. And so lots and lots of businesses are looking for people to work in sectors and areas like market research, PR, advertising, research and development, marketing, planning, human resources, or even anything in the media, again, because it's all about understanding your audience. So if you've got that basis of understanding people, any kind of people, or whether it's the population at large, you're like immediately ahead of the game, because a lot of people don't think about the end user of one of these, of a media channel or a product or a service or anything like that. But as a sociologist, you will have that almost sort of hardwired into you, that you are always thinking about the impact on the person, and hopefully you'll be an empathetic person with a bit of compassion, and that will also help with any of those kind of jobs. So people-centered jobs, public sector, but also private sector. There's an awful lot of jobs out there, and I'll be totally honest with you, the job that I got after leaving university, I didn't even know that existed until I actually applied for it. And I think this is one of the things, there are so many jobs out there, and there's such nuances between these jobs that are perfect for sociologists, and often we get a bit of a bad feeling about it, because we think, oh, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to become a sociologist? You don't have to do that, because there's loads and loads of vocations and career paths you can take that sociology lend itself to incredibly well. Sorry, that's a bit of a long answer. There's lots of things you can do.
Obviously, we're biased as well, but if you think what's happened in the world within the last year and the changes that have occurred, I would argue that sociology is becoming more important than ever, actually.
Absolutely. If you just look at the kind of, even just going onto Twitter, and if you look at how people are talking about the subject, and like you say, in the last year, we've had global things that have been happening that happen on a global scale, but that affect us individually. And that is globalization. That's sociology in action. And I think if we can understand that, and if you can begin to understand that, and as I say, you're going to have that advantage. A sociologist will have that advantage over Joe Public because of that understanding of that issue.
Yeah. And so if people have been reading about George Floyd, Black Lives Matter and so on over the summer, they've already done some sociology already without realizing it.
Absolutely. They've immersed themselves into that world, and they've taken, whatever opinion they've taken from it, they've taken it based on what they've seen. But then, of course, we have to understand that those things that they've seen and read and heard have all been represented and put together in a certain way, and that's getting on to something else. But that absolutely is getting involved in current issues, current debates, and that doesn't necessarily mean going on a march or going on a protest, although that is wonderful, that active participation. Just reading the news, watching current events, subscribing to useful social media channels like the BBC or Vice or The Economist, anything like that is just getting your head into those sociological issues.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make. So if you haven't yet done that, I would say make sure that you are keeping in touch with the news, and actually using contemporary examples in your work and your essays will be of great benefit as well.
Absolutely. Exam boards are looking for that kind of stuff. So you might as well start using it now. If you can talk about stuff that is going on in your life, that makes things so much easier, in my opinion anyway.
Thanks, Ben. And let's think what makes a good sociology student. I know that's a little bit broad, but we've both been teaching a fair while. There are certain skills and attributes that make a good sociology student. What would your advice be?
Right. I'll keep this as simple as I can. I will say, number one, get involved. So actively engage in your lessons, whether that's talking to the tutor or the lecturer or other people, or even if it's outside of your lessons or seminars, just talking and getting involved in that subject you're in. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I think you have to accept that sociology is a subject where you're going to be required to ultimately do a fair bit of reading. And so I think the earlier you can start on that, the better. And also just having that drive to want to find out more, which will come from kind of curiosity and inquisitiveness. So being up for and being accepting of the fact that if you want to do well in this subject, that you're going to have to do a bit of reading, or you can do it, by watching stuff or listening to your podcast, for instance, but reading is important. And I think the third one, just being compassionate to yourself and to other people, and empathetic. So having that understanding, if you can try, it's very difficult to do, especially if you're a bit younger, but trying to put yourself in the position of somebody else so you can imagine what they feel like. If you have that skill to do that, or the ability to do that, I think that's a massively important thing. So 3 things: listen, actively engage, and empathy, and sort of being able to put yourself in the shoes of someone else would be my sort of 3 kind of top things that make a great sociologist. But those things are all skills that obviously get developed over time. So no teacher is going to expect your students to rock up and be the finished product on day one. This is something that will happen gradually and cumulatively, we hope, over time. What about you, Matthew? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'd agree with those. I'd also say that, we can't ignore the fact that it is an essay-based subject, or certainly a written-based subject. And so I think that actually wider reading also helps. You don't just have to read about sociology. Improving your skills in English or English literature, those skills are also crossovers as well. So, it does concern me a little bit when students say, I don't really like writing. I'm going to be honest, it is a writing-based subject. You're expected to do essays, but that is a skill. The more you practice it, the better you'll get. It's as simple as that.
I think with that as well, like talking about transferable skills earlier, like these it sounds ridiculous, but these skills of reading and writing, they don't go away. And whatever job you do, you are going to need to be able to do both of those. And you need to improve, but like you will improve on those things as time goes on, and that's the kind of thing that sociology will set you up really well for. I think the other thing to mention as well is to mention about reading and wider reading. It doesn't need to be you have to go and buy a gazillion textbooks. As we've talked about already, it might be just following the right people on social media, looking at the news every day, or just talking to people around you. Talk to your parents, talk to your families about what do they think about this. See if you can see things from their side, and then you can sort of extrapolate out what you've read to get a broader picture of things. That's one of the things I always try to encourage my students to do. Read something and then talk to someone else about it. See what they think, and if they haven't read it, say, "Oi, go and read this. It's interesting."
Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting, I'm sure you find this as well, Ben, that actually a lot of students take sociology without really knowing what it is, or sometimes it's just an extra filler and it ends up being their favourite subject, actually. I think that's always really encouraging. And the numbers that are going on to do it at higher level are increasing as well.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the numbers of candidates yesterday came out. I think sociology was 6th or 7th in the list of all subjects. So, and we've stayed pretty much, we've held that position there for about 2, 3, 4 years. So I think that this is something that more and more people are getting interested in. I think partly that's because of what's going on in the world, but I think also people just want to try something different. And this subject just encourages a bit of critical thinking, individualism, and all the power to anyone taking it.
Yeah, and there is a campaign to get sociology in all schools at the moment anyway as well. So hopefully that will happen at some point in the future.
I think it's mad it isn't. I genuinely think it's crazy it isn't. So, yeah, government, pull your fingers out.
Exactly. Thanks, Ben. Do you just want to plug your podcast quickly so people can subscribe to that as well?
Yeah, sure. If you want to go and listen to me bag on about issues of sociological importance, you can follow the Take One podcast from All Sociology, and you can get that by just searching All Sociology, all one word, on whatever podcast app you use.
Brilliant, thank you. See, we're not in competition with each other. We actually want you to listen to both our podcasts.
Yeah, why not? I think we're doing completely different things. I mean, I haven't done anything for ages, so there's that. But yeah, go if you don't. I think what's so good about the internet these days is that you've got people like Matthew, you've got people like me who are obviously a bit weird, who just love the subject and just will do this basically for free. Students should make the most of it because these are all resources. And you might think, oh, well, what am I going to learn from listening to blokes talk about sociology? You might pick up one thing that you hold on to for the rest of your 2 years or however long you're studying it, and that could take you through. You don't know unless you engage in something. You don't know what you don't know. And I think, what was it, A.A. Milne once said? And a Winnie the Pooh. I like a bit of Winnie the Pooh quote me. I don't know that sort of bloke who would, but I do. And it's something it says something a bit like this. It's like, sometimes you need to go beyond your field to find the things that you want to find. Things ain't going to come to you. You have to go out and find them. The beauty of what people like Matthew is doing, and there's so many of them around, is they're literally providing all this content for you. All you've got to do is click a few buttons. So it's there for the taking.
I agree. So you've got a couple of quotes there as well, people. We mentioned Auguste Comte. Keep that one. If you just remembered that one, okay, if you go into your first sociology lesson and quote that to your sociology teacher, they're going to be quite impressed. So even if you take one thing away from each podcast, as Ben says, I think that's a good thing to know. Thank you very much for your time today, Ben. Really appreciate it.
No troubles, man. No troubles. Is there anything else you need?
That's all good. And good luck to all of you who are starting sociology for the first time. You're going to love it.
Absolutely.
Cheers, Ben.
Cool. Thanks very much, Matthew. Cheers for that.
If you are a regular listener to the Sociology Show, then you could help with the costs of promoting and hosting the podcast. If you can spare even a small amount, then you can donate on the GoFundMe.com website by searching for The Sociology Show. There is no obligation, of course, and all future downloads will continue to be free. A huge thank you to all those that have already donated. Your kind gesture will help to continue keep the show going and growing. Best wishes and keep enjoying the show.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the sociologyshowpodcast@gmail.com.